Board of Education. It is Monday, September 10th, 2018. We are at NCI Eastlake, and it is approximately 7:02 p.m. Mr. Parkinson, will you call the roll?
Dr. Beal?
Here.
Mr. Jones?
Here.
Mrs. Perchinsky?
Here.
Mrs. Warner?
Here.
Mrs. Zurich?
Here.
Thank you, Mr. Parkinson. Will you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Parkinson, are there any citizens who would like to speak?
Just one, Mrs. Warner and Mrs. Missy Toppings, to speak about the SOI High School.
Sure, come on up. State your name, address, and what you're going to talk about, and you have 3 minutes to share your concerns with us.
Okay. Can I just go over here?
Yeah, right on the microphone.
Good evening. My name is Missy Toppings. I live at 706 Woodstock, and I'm coming to you in Eastlake, sorry. And I'm coming to you to talk to you about the SOI High School. I'm coming as a concerned parent of 3 Move Eastlake students. 2 of my children attend SOI, and 1 attends Longfellow. I'd like to know about the SOI High School. In 1 year's time, the first class of 9th graders will be at SOI. I've heard nothing definitive either way in regards to the high school situation, but being familiar with the SOI building, I am aware that the space for high school is limited. In January of this year, a proposal for an ancillary building was made public. I'd like to know if this $4 million building will be used for the high school building. I know that there were lists of things like a gymnasium, a music room, and classrooms, but nothing specific was earmarked for those classrooms. One of my major concerns is that the district may have the SOI High School students return to their home schools of North and South High after being told that our children would be attending SOI through 12th grade and graduating with not only a diploma, but also an associate's degree possibly from Akron University. I just kind of want to make sure that we're all kind of on the same page and that the public is aware of what's going to be happening as to where our children will be going. And if any definitive plans have been made or will be made public relatively soon, that would be great, because with this coming up in about a year, I'm very nervous about where my 8th grader is going to be going for 9th grade. So that was my concern, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. I will have Mr. Thompson just address briefly, and then I would strongly suggest that you have a meeting with him and talk to him face to face.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Toppings. Mr. Thompson.
I believe we have a parent meeting. When is our parent meeting?
We are finalizing the date, but it will be late September, early October.
Yeah. So we are definitely having a SOI High School. The only way that we would not have a SOI High School is if, and that's what we're having our parent meeting for, because some of the feedback we're hearing is that some of the kids are choosing to go back to their home high schools. So we have to see what the numbers are from a financial perspective. So provided the numbers stay reasonable that would sustain the program, then we'll continue on into high school. So it is not our intent not to, unless the parents don't support it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mrs. Toppings. And Mr. Thompson, I think you have some lovely people to introduce.
I do. And you'll start to see, and I think it's a really good thing, and probably overdue. And not that our presentations historically to the board have not been productive or important, but we focused on students and what the students were doing, which is great for the board to see. But this year we're going to focus on our strategic plan, we're going to focus on our goals, and we're going to bring that data back to you every single meeting. So that's where the focus will be primarily for this school year. We have 2 superstars here. Vicki and Deanna. Vicki is head of NCI Eastlake. Dee is head of NCI Willoughby. They report to a queen stallion,
Another
Lori,
superstar.
another superstar. And they all do a fantastic job. But we wanted to give you the factual data. Our state report card's coming out. How do our schools do? How are we doing? So I want you to get a good handle on what the state report card is, what the data says, and where we are as a school district. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to you two.
So Mr. Thompson asked Vicki and I to participate in tonight's board meeting. We were super excited to do so. Vicki's like the data queen. She's super great at going to like different Ohio Department of Education websites, the web exams, finding the real data, and that's what she did for us today.
I don't love presenting though, so if I'm nervous, I am. So the Northern Career Institute, we have a mission, and our mission is to prepare students for a meaningful career and beyond. And one way that we measure our success towards that mission is through web exams, and web exams are like our state testing. They're aligned to our CTE or Career Tech state standards. So we are here to share that data. So this is for our seniors that just graduated. And they're separated by pathways. So our first pathway is Allied Health and Nursing. And those programs are Allied Health, LPN, and Medical Assisting. We had an 84% pass rate compared to 75% is the statewide average.
So we blew that out of the water.
But wait, there's more. Business and Administrative Services, that's our Business Academy. We had a 79% pass rate. The statewide percent is 39. So
Awesome.
really well there. Cosmetology, we had a 100% pass rate, 81% is statewide.
And 100% of the students who went on to Columbus to take the state board cosmetology license also passed. Every single student who went down to Columbus passed.
Ground transportation, that's our auto collision and auto technologies, 100% of them passed, 50% is the statewide. Hospitality, 83% passed, 39 is the statewide. And then production welding, they take a AWS certified welding exam and 82% of them pass.
And the grand total is?
We had an overall pass rate of 90%.
Awesome.
So we have really awesome teachers. I mean, they do a heck of a job. Most of them are from industry, so they know what the students need to know and be able to do.
And this doesn't appear on the state report card.
It does, but it's in the whole consortium, so
Yeah.
you won't see just BOE Meeting data. Yeah. The other thing we look at is program completers. So these are students who finished their junior year, started their senior year, and finished. So again, our program completers are well above what the statewide.
So what you see in the parentheses for statewide, what that means is that's the average number of students who started in the program but never actually finished. So maybe they dropped the program, maybe for whatever reason, maybe they needed more credits at their home school and they couldn't afford that 2-hour chunk in the afternoon. Maybe they figured out they were disinterested. So if this, for instance, with Allied Health and Nursing, that first bullet point, 87% is who finished the program. But here at NCI, it was actually 100%. So we were above the state curve on all of those scores as well. At NCI Willoughby, we have a program called Bridge to Success. Bridge to Success is an online program. Back in the day when I went to high school, remember OWE, where kids like worked part of the day and went to school part of the day? That's Bridge to Success. We last year celebrated our 1,000th graduate at Bridge to Success. Last year, the class of 2018, 13% of the class graduated because of the Bridge to Success program. In last
So
year...
can you say that again to make that clear? 13% of our graduating class would not have graduated without BTS.
You are correct. You are correct.
That's a pretty high percentage.
And then once those students came to us, and like currently, to give you an example, we have 122 students in the program right now currently. What we're seeing on average is that their attendance rate is improving 60%. Many of them work. It's difficult when you work 40 hours a week to try to fit in 8 hours a day for school, another 40 hours. So this is a program that allows our attendance rate to also be affected. And the student discipline occurrence decreased. We only had 1 discipline occurrence last year out of the number of students that we had. We also have a program called Success Academy, grades 7 through 10, a career tech prep program. In the state of Ohio, you cannot start a tech program until your junior year, and all of our Excel tech programs really start junior year instead of senior year, so it's a 2-year program. However, what we found 4 years ago now is that many students are super duper into career tech at 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, and they're just like waiting their time to get in. So we started a program called Success Academy. Our goal is to prepare students for a program in career tech education, and I think we reached that goal when last year the students who were eligible to apply for a program, and eligible meant based on they were sophomores going into their junior year, 100% of them not only got into a career tech program, but got into their first choice. And 70% decrease in student discipline occurrences based on the year before when they were at their home school, and 55% increase in daily attendance from the year before when they were at their home school. And that's NCI Eastlake and NCI Willoughby.
Do you have any questions for them while we have them here about how these programs work, or?
Well, I mean, my daughter is in the program over there, and to even know that she's getting the type of knowledge she is now. I mean, we have been doing, she's a senior, so we've been doing some college shopping, and when we met with someone at one of the colleges who's in the actual nursing program, he goes, maybe the credits won't exactly transfer, but what you have seen and what you are doing currently right now, the hands-on experience, is going to help you immensely just in those first-year classes. So I am excited to see my other boys coming up, you know, what paths they're going to take that we're offering in the district. So, and these women all in this are phenomenal. So thank you for doing what you're doing for my child and for the others here, because it's huge. It's huge.
I don't think there's any career technical programs at home high schools anywhere in the state that rival what we have to offer to our students here in Willoughby Eastlake. The quality of programming, the facilities, the options, to not even leave their home high schools. Well, they leave their home high schools, but stay in the district. So.
And my daughter will be actually working in her field her senior year. I mean, that's what blows my mind, is that she will already, for her credit hours, she won't be coming here for classes, she'll be working. That's huge, to take that experience also into her college. So.
And that's typical for any career tech program at NCI Eastlake or Willoughby, is that a portion, if not more than that, of their senior year is spent in industry. And many of them are getting paid to do so.
Right.
And above minimum wage.
Towards college.
Yeah.
Can you explain what, like, the community consumers could benefit from our, students in our training programs, whether that be auto collision, cosmetology, how people in our community can benefit?
Yeah, there's a couple different avenues that I'd like to address that. The first avenue is we can't go a week without employers in Lake County just showing up at our door, knocking, and trying to find ways to interview these kids, meet these kids. They're donating metal for the opportunity in exchange to do a guest speaker spot to explain what their company is, what they're looking for. It's good on our end because these kids then get to hear from real employers in Lake County, because sometimes when teachers talk, all the kids hear are wah, wah, wah. But then when a real person from industry, even though, by the way, their teacher's a real person from industry, but when they come in, it clicks for them. So there's that part of it. It's connecting current Lake County employers with these students for a pipeline of a workforce. And the second part of it is our students are constantly doing projects for the community. For instance, Chief Reich, who's the Eastlake Police Chief, came over 2 weeks ago, met with our auto collision students, and our auto collision students are going to retrofit a van into a SWAT team vehicle. So we're doing something with our community. Currently, right now, Mayor Morley from the City of Eastlake wrote a $35,000 block grant, which he got, and now our welding students are going to be fabricating a brand new skate park for the City of Eastlake, where our welders are doing all the work, and they're going to be kind of working alongside the city engineer. We're going to be with the service manager, so we're not just a pipeline for Lake County, we're also helping Lake County.
And then also, our cosmetology program offers services to people, so if you want to go get your hair done or your nails done, we can get it done on Euclid Avenue is our other location. And then auto services and auto collision, you can get your car work done as well.
All of our cars are customer cars, everything from detailing to oil changes to...
My car is in there right now. My BMW is in there right now, getting fixed where I dented the side of it. And it would cost me my $1,000 deductible to go to the dealership to fix it. And it'll probably cost me $80 in material. That's
The catch is it will take a little longer.
It takes longer, but they do a fabulous job. And look at, this has been facial. That's sad to admit, but I'm man enough to admit it. I get facials there because it feels really good. It's cheap. It's like $10.
While you wait for your car, you get a facial.
I drop my car, I'll get a facial. Why not? You know?
Why not the nails?
No, that's going too far.
Okay.
And all of our phone numbers for programs like that can be found on our website at weschools.org. And if you click the Northern Career Institute, this is a little commercial right now, any one of our programs have a link, you can find the phone number to make an appointment. And we'd love to have you.
And if I could just add, the queen in the back, not to forget that we also have adult programming, and it is not uncommon for us to have a parent, a mother and a son, or a father and a daughter, or aunt and nieces and nephews in our programs. They're in the same program that is simultaneously being taught for an adult cohort and a high school. And we can't be more excited to see what we can do to improve the whole family, not just the student who's part of our program.
And Steve, the money that's coming in from the program for the adults, we're hitting a decent number
Over
with
$1 million in revenue that we generate. That's why it's, you know, you might wonder why is it called Northern Career Institute? It's because we're marketing as a regular, you know, institution that adults would attend, and we didn't want to make it feel like just a high school. So that's what Lori focuses a lot. She focuses on lots of things. I've got her running in about 7 directions to include our furniture cleaning right now. I think we're the only public school in the country that does that. So that's a lot of money. We're getting close to pushing $1 million a year that we're generating in revenue from programming. So.
And the high schoolers benefit because a lot of the equipment that they get to use, they probably wouldn't have if it wasn't for the adult programs that we could, you know, they can share the equipment, so.
The other thing that I love hearing about is that I believe the little coffee shop.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you need to share that.
So we also, in this building, we don't have lunch service or food or beverage or anything like that, so, and this was all great, but.
That's great.
We have a coffee shop in the back that's run by adults with disabilities through, it's called Support for You. They send like a job coach and then some adults with disabilities to run the coffee shop. And when they're not there, like an emergency happens or something, our students are like devastated. So.
And it's not that we don't feed our kids, they eat back at their home schools.
Oh, yeah, I should have said that.
We are looking at expanding that, though.
Yeah.
Taking a look at how we can do that. So.
And it just started as a coffee shop, right?
Right, well, 80%, I mean, our whole mission here is meaningful work. And so every student, the goal is to find them meaningful work that is going to, that they can build and have a career. And so what we learned, or what I learned, was 80% of our adult disabled, developmentally disabled population are unemployed. So how do we really look at this whole community and whole child and whole family and make an impact? And so last year we started with this partnership where this group comes in and they started serving coffee. And a few months later, the day kept getting longer and longer, and now they're here through lunch. And
What all do they serve now? It's a lot more than just coffee now, right?
It depends on the day. So some days it's taco day. They'll have a salad day. They have sometimes hot dogs, bagels.
They have Pop-Tarts.
Pop-Tarts.
I don't know why I know that, but I know that. Not that I'm here eating them.
The other thing, Laura, that you mentioned that I love, we're doing it as a district, but I was involved in the beginning listening to these ladies talk about the whole child or the whole person. And a lot of these people are struggling, trying to get to school, trying to find childcare, trying to do this, trying to do that. They don't have money for gas, they can't, all the things. And this team has put together a great, lots of resources for these kids and adults that want to make a difference and get there. And I think that's really impressive too, that our district is after the whole child, not just the brains and the skills.
We also, I guess I should get this really quick and then I promise I'll stop.
It's okay, you should brag. You should brag about your program.
We also have our own little food pantry and clothing pantry closet, I guess. We have students with disabilities that are in a program here too, and they kind of help stock and make sure we're not giving people expired food and things like that. And the neat thing about giving out the food is that we hook the students up with outside resources that they can use. You know, it's kind of like a quick fix, and then set them up with something more long-term. So, sure.
Great work.
Is there a way we could have those numbers? Just even, I just like the.
Sure.
Just forward me the PowerPoint and I'll get it to you.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Thank you.
No, I don't think so.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, we just need a little light, not much. A little sunshine. We'll move to item number 2 on the agenda. I'm looking for a motion for the approval of the minutes of the meeting August 13th, 2018.
Madam President,
Mrs. Perchinsky.
I'd like to approve the minutes 2A from August 13th.
Thank you, Mrs. Perchinsky. Is there a second?
I will second.
Thank you, Mrs. Zern. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes of the meeting August 13th, 2018. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Parkinson, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Perchinsky?
Yes.
Mrs. Zern?
Yes.
Mr. Beal?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
And Mrs. Warner?
Yes, motion is carried. I'm looking for a motion to approve the item 2B, approval of the minutes of August 21st, 2018. Is there a motion?
Madam President, I
Dr.
move that
Beal.
we approve the minutes of August 21st, 2018.
Thank you, Dr. Beal. Is there a second?
Madam President, I second that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes of the meeting August 21st, 2018. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Parkinson, will you call the roll?
Dr. Beal?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Perchinsky?
Yes.
Mrs. Zern?
Yes.
Mrs. Warner?
Yes, motion has carried. It's now time for the treasurer's report. Mr. Parkinson.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. The first item for your consideration is the financial report for August 31st. The information for this report can be found in Exhibit A. Just an item to note, property taxes will be receipted not in the month of August, but this current month of September. The county was a little late in remitting taxes, which is not unusual. Most of the time they remit in August, but sometimes they do remit in September. That will cause a delay in our reimbursements from the state of Ohio with respect to homestead rollback. Typically we'll see that in October, but because this payment was delayed, we probably won't see it until November. Item B is the certificate of estimated resources for the month of August. That information can be found under that item. Next item for your consideration is the amended appropriations for the month of August. Excuse me. The information can be found in Exhibit C. Item D for your consideration is the permanent appropriations for the current fiscal year. Just a couple items of note. With respect to revenue, I had mentioned that the county auditor's office sent me a letter saying that the public utility valuations are declining. Therefore, the tax collections will be declining. So unfortunately, I will have to revise down the tangible personal property tax by $710,000, which is a pretty big hit. I suspect that when I get my Schedule A from the county auditor's office, that's a report that I get from the county that outlines the values and the estimated taxes that might be collected for calendar year 19. I suspect that the personal property tax that we'll collect in the second half of our fiscal year will probably see a decline as well. Right now, I'll keep it at the $2.3 million, but I suspect that we will experience yet another decline in revenue from that particular line item.
Is that $700,000 in each fiscal year, or is it $700,000 over the 5-year forecast?
It's every year.
Every year.
Every year.
That's a big hit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good news.
Thank you, and thank you for sharing.
Good news, we received a little bit more money in casino money, $2,800.
Whoa! Problem solved.
That's also in the appropriation. The other increase in revenue is the homestead and rollback. It's about $85,000. That will be every year. So that's about it with revenues. On the expenditure side, a couple of items to note. Additional special education services. Unfortunately, special education costs go up from year to year. We estimated what we thought we would pay out for the fiscal year. That was a little under, so we added back $360,000 into the budget to account for those expenses. Fab Lab expenses, district-wide, another $48,000. And then another $50,000 in other expenditures. That is most of the changes in the permanent improvements. There are some changes in state and federal grants, but that is related to what ODE has signed off on as final sign-off. We made some estimates again at the beginning of the year, kind of guessing what the ODE would approve. They finalized all of those revenues and expenditures in the reports. I highlighted those in bright yellow so that you could see what numbers changed. Those numbers are locked in. Those aren't going to change. So those are set for the remaining of the fiscal year. That's basically it with the appropriations. So next will be the 5-year forecast, which is next month. So obviously I have the personal property tax collections to incorporate. The other thing that I will incorporate into the 5-year forecast are projected costs with respect to raises. That is not in previous forecasts. I probably put those in so that the Board of Education can get an idea of what 1% might cost. So you could, decide what you want to do.
Are you going to run just one scenario or multiple scenarios?
I will run one scenario for the forecast, but in my notes and assumptions, I'll have multiple scenarios.
Can you make that scenario 2%?
Yep. So that you're aware, the current 5-year forecast has a negative $4.2 million in year 5. This public utility tax collection hit isn't obviously doing us any favors. That 5th year is going to get significantly worse. The other thing that's going to decline cash balances obviously are the projections of the new contract negotiations that are coming up this winter.
This is 2022.
2022. Which is going to put a huge amount of pressure on 21. Don't be surprised if you might see a red number there. We're getting close to being negative in '21. Right now, we're at $2 million, $3 million in fiscal '21. We're going to be running pretty thin come '21 as well.
And that takes into account the 700
It
compounded
not
every year?
now.
No.
Yeah. So the five-year forecast for next month will take that in consideration, and that $2 million balance is going to decline rapidly. So 2020 is probably going to be their last fiscal year, which is next fiscal year that's positive. So obviously, it's no secret the district needs a new levy. The Constitution of the state of Ohio keeps property taxes flat by law. It does not matter what happens to property values. Amazon could build the biggest warehouse on the planet inside Willoughby Eastlake schools. Our collections will stay exactly the same because of the Ohio Constitution. Values go up, tax rates go down. Tax rates go up, values go down. It's inverse. There's no direct relationship between rates and values. It's inverse. Doesn't matter if 1,000 homes go up inside the school district. Those people pay more taxes, everybody else pays less. The district gets exactly the same amount of money. It's in the Constitution. It's commonly referred to as House Bill 920. That's the way it works. So that is what is coming up next month.
Understand there's, just for sake of general understanding, construction budget is construction budget. Construction money cannot be used for general fund. That is a completely separate budget.
It is illegal to do so. And we are audited every year on it. And so there's an independent third party that looks at all the books, all the numbers, and verifies that that is in fact the case.
So you can see buildings going up and a deficit. And it seems counterintuitive, but they are completely separate.
Completely separate. In fact, if you look in the financial reports from month to month, if you look under what's called capital, that's where the construction money sits. It's completely independent of general fund, just like the debt payments, completely independent of the general fund. The debt payments are funded by 3.99 mils, or 3.5 mils. That is the levy that was passed in November a few years ago. That is completely separate. The PI fund is completely separate. The federal and state grants, completely separate. We operate many, many, many different accounts, including the general fund. But the general fund is one that gets focused on with the 5-year forecast. So. Next item for the board's consideration, which requires a separate vote, is a resolution to rescind Resolution R-18-12 with respect to the payment for the Belfour invoices.
This is specific to demolition of the burned central office.
So
Yes.
let's get a motion, and then we can have some discussion and ask Mr. Parkinson some questions. Sure. I'm looking for a motion to approve Resolution Treasurer 3E, a resolution rescinding Resolution R-18-12, which previously authorized payment of invoices from Belfour Property Restoration in an amount not to exceed $950,000. Is there a motion?
Madam President,
Mrs. Perchinsky.
I'd like to move item 3A, a resolution rescinding Resolution R-18-12, which previously authorized payment of invoices from Belfour Property Restoration in an amount not to exceed $950,000.
Thank you, Mrs. Perchinsky. Is there a second?
Madam President,
Mrs. Zerman.
I will second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded, and I will just read it again, that we approve item 3E, a resolution rescinding Resolution R-18-12, which previously authorized payment of invoices from Belfour Property Restoration in an amount not to exceed $950,000. So, Mr. Parkinson, any light you could shed so we can understand this better?
Yes, as you may be aware, the insurance company settled with the school district for right around $8.9 million. Belfour was hired by the insurance company, not the school district. When we settled with the insurance company, Obviously, we were paid reimbursement funds. Belfour did work. Once we settled with Belfour, we asked Belfour for supporting documentations related to the demolition of the central office building on Ridge Road. They, to this date, they have been working with Mr. Riley, your attorney. They have not provided any details, to my knowledge, to Mr. Riley regarding the demolition costs of the building. We're not saying that we don't owe them anything, but as practice with any purchase order that I have in my system, from $1 all the way on up to a $5 million AECOM invoice for construction, there's always backup. I cannot just put a PO in the system and cut a check. I cannot do that. I have to have supporting documentation with any check that I write so that the auditors, the board, the community can see that basically proper public purpose was behind it. There's a legitimate reason for this expense. And I certainly wasn't going to write a check for $900,000 just because someone says, hey, you owe me $900,000. If that's the case, to be ridiculous, anybody can come to me and say, hey, you owe me money, and I would have to write them a check. So with Mr. Riley's recommendation, Steve and I met with Mr. Riley last Friday. He is asking the Board of Education to rescind the resolution that you adopted in January of this calendar year and ask that we continue to ask for documentation from Belfour. There was an email that I sent the Board of Education last week about this as well.
Any other questions for Mr. Parkinson? Mrs. Zern, look like you might have one.
Yeah, the information that they did give us, it just wasn't accurate. Like, they weren't giving us it was estimates is the information that we were given from them, not true work costs.
Correct. So for example, when AECOM sends me information to pay a $4 million invoice, they have an extraordinary amount of documentation behind that. They have what masonry work was done, what steel work was done, what concrete work was done, what utility work was done, by whom, how much, it goes on and on and on. They just don't give me a one-page summary that says, hey, we did work, you owe us $4 million. There's quite a bit of detail that goes behind that. Mr. Riley suspects that there's probably a similar amount of detail for these particular invoices. And he has asked Belfour to produce the invoices for all sorts of work. He cited Ohio Revised Code. I won't go too deep into the weeds. But he's recited Ohio Revised Code that applies to not only school districts, but to all political subdivisions when it comes to making payment against a public treasury.
Mr. Parkinson, Mr. Jones has a question.
Sure. When do we expect updated documentation?
That's the problem.
As Mr. Thompson knows, that him and I wait for Mr. Riley. We're just waiting for Mr. Riley is doing the communication for the school district. I have no direct contact with Belfour. I know Mr. Thompson does not have any direct contact. Mr. Riley is the person that is the communication line between us and them.
Any other questions for Mr. Parkinson?
And the risk to the district is a potential lawsuit if Belfour wants to sue.
I will say this, under 5705 41D, which is the Ohio Revised Code that says I cannot make a payment without a purchase order. I don't have a purchase order in place. I don't have a contract in place.
Right.
There's no contract between us and Belfour. I am the only legal signatory for the school district. When things are being signed for debt issuances or anything else that comes across the board agenda, without my signature, it's not a legal document. What Belfour has is not a contract. Mr. Riley can explain it more, but suffice it to say, under 570541D, there is no contract. So that's the other thing we're arguing with Belfour.
So our risk is cost.
Mr. Riley's
Insurance
cost.
or attorney fees.
Yes.
Their risk is the judge rules there was no contract and we owe them nothing. It's unlikely. but
Unlikely, but-
That's their risk.
So-
And we don't think we owe them nothing.
Right.
We just don't think we owe them.
No, we don't, and we've never said that. Mr. Riley has communicated that to Belfour, but at the same time, Mr. Riley has asked, please let us see some details so that we have some documentation behind the expenditure.
So would there be a purchase order between Belfour and the insurance company, like themselves, or was there no documentation there?
I don't know.
They've got no documentation, so we don't know.
More to come.
More to come, yeah.
Mr. Parkinson, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Pruczynski?
Yes.
Mrs. Zern?
Yes.
Dr. Beal?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Warner?
Yes, motion is carried. I'm looking for a motion to approve item 3F, resolution to approve the GMP amendment for the new roofing on 2 transportation buildings not to exceed $250,000. Is there a motion?
Madam President,
Mr. Jones?
I motion to approve item 3F, resolution to approve GMP amendment for the new roofing on 2 transportation buildings not to exceed $250,000.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Is there a second?
Madam President, I second that motion.
Thank you, Dr. Beal. It's been moved and seconded that we approve item 3F, resolution to approve the GMP amendment for the new roofing on 2 transportation buildings not to exceed $250,000. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Parkinson, will you call the roll?
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Dr. Beal?
Yes.
Mrs. Zern?
Yes.
Mrs. Pruczynski?
Yes.
Mrs. Warner?
Yes, motion is carried. Mr. Parkinson?
Thank you, Madam President. Members of the board, the next item for consideration is the Kronos renewal and upgrade for our time clocks. One of the things that we have done to make the district a little bit more efficient, instead of processing literally stacks of timesheets and other types of payroll information by hand, we implemented the Kronos time clock a couple years ago. This contract will upgrade us with the software and make us that much more efficient and decrease our costs at the same time. So Kronos is taking care of the implementation costs. It won't cost us anything. And then they are going to, this will also renew our annual contract with Kronos, upkeep if we have questions or issues that come out. So that's what this contract is.
Thank you, Mr. Parkinson. You have heard the treasurer's recommendation. Is there a motion?
Madam President,
Mrs. Zern?
I make the motion to approve item 3G, Kronos renewal with an upgrade to Kronos for K-12 workforce ready.
Thank you, Mrs. Zern. Is there a second?
I will second that.
Thank you, Mrs. Pruczynski. It's been moved and seconded that we approve item 3G, Kronos renewal with an upgrade to Kronos for K-12 workforce ready. Any discussion, questions? Hearing none, Mr. Parkinson, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Zern?
Yes.
Mrs. Pruczynski?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Dr. Beal?
Yes.
And Mrs. Warner?
Yes, motion has carried. Mr. Parkinson.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. The next item for your consideration is the Ray & Associates Capital Asset Services. This particular contract, they're going to assist the district in fixed assets. Our fixed asset program is literally my spreadsheet. They have a much more sophisticated spreadsheet for keeping track of fixed assets. We ran this by the state auditor's office. The state auditor's office loves this. They can incorporate this easily into the work papers. There's a nice, neat trail of paperwork. And obviously, it's far more superior than an Excel spreadsheet that I've come up with. So this is what this is. Item A for your consideration, purchase orders and blanket certificates. Excuse me. There is one purchase order for your consideration. This is to PSI. And there are two then and now certificates, one to House Hanson and the others to Nicholas Paper and Supply Company. Advance of funds, item J. There are two for your consideration, one to food service for $62,000 and one to the nursing program for $78,500. Return of advances, there are several for your consideration. All of the returns of advances are from state and federal grants that we have previously basically loaned them out from the general fund, so those are being returned to the general fund. Item L, this is a transfer of funds. This is a direct transfer from the PI fund to the debt service fund with respect to the various debt issuances that the district has. This is not bond retirement debt. This isn't the construction debt. This is all the COPS debt that we have. Under auditor state guidelines, we are allowed to make a direct transfer from the PI fund to the bond retirement fund without having to go to the general fund. The general fund technically is the only fund that is allowed to transfer. But in this case, the auditor state says when the PI fund is responsible for debt payments, it may make a direct transfer to the bond retirement fund without having to go through the general fund. Next item for your consideration, these are to close accounts. These are related to 018 student activity accounts. Item N is a transfer of funds to the Employee Termination Benefit Fund. This is $75,000. Item O are gifts and donations from various individuals and organizations who have given generously to the school districts to the various programs listed under item O. Item P, student activity program purposes, goals, and proposed budgets and revisions. The auditor state asks that the Board of Education approve each individual student activity account budget and purpose and goals. So purpose and goals is an advisor saying, I would like to do X for the students. Here's how I'm going to accomplish these things, and here's how much money I expect to raise, and this is what I'm going to spend the money on. So not only do they have to submit a budget, but they have to explain what their budget is for. So we're responsible for monitoring that purpose and goals is adhered to. And that's one of the things that the auditor state looks at when he conducts his audit. Item Q is the sale of surplus equipment, and there's just one. It is a baby grand piano. The high school brought in an expert to determine whether or not this piano is worth saving. It is not. It would cost far more to repair this piano than it's worth, so they decided to scrap it. What we're going to do is we're going to put it up for auction and hope that maybe somebody would want it for parts, or maybe they have the time or resources to save it. I really didn't want to just throw it in the dumpster, so we're gonna try it on eBay or some other avenue to see what kind of money we can get for this particular piece of equipment. And just one side note, the auditor state has begun their work. They started their work today. They're at the NCI Willoughby campus to do their work, and they'll be here through the end of February at the latest. Good times. Then those conclude my reports, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Parkinson. It's now time for item number 4, the superintendent report.
Thank you, Madam President. We had a last-minute cancellation on our presenter, so we will make sure that we have presenters from AECOM, the South Project at our next meeting. But just a general update on our facilities. The steel was the issue, as you know, on our North Campus. A new steel schedule has been made, and that was shared with us a couple of weeks ago. And so far, we've gotten all of our shipments actually a few days ahead. So we're a few days ahead on the steel shipments. So those are going well. The first academic side of steel is almost completely up, and they are beginning to pour the second floor concrete. The backside will be last, but that will come. The goal is to get as much veneer on that building as possible, under roof, and windowed before winter hits. So it's an aggressive schedule, but we're making up a lot of ground at North, which of course is our project that's the furthest behind. Still probably about 15 days behind schedule, but it was 30 days behind schedule about 4 weeks ago. So are doing quite well trying to make up ground, ensuring us that we're still on time and on budget, on schedule. The Longfellow project is, I would encourage you to go take a look at it. It looks different almost every single day. The kindergarten wing, which is the first part that's nearest Stevens Boulevard, drywalled and painting now, which is pretty crazy. There's paint on the walls. They're moving very quickly. All the concrete is poured on all decks now, so you can walk on the second floor. It's all the backside, which is on the bottom floor, which is grades 2 and 3, is taking shape as well. Most of the drywall is up there as well, so you can completely see the school. And what we're hoping to do, if you remember on all of our renderings, we had those huge blocked steel letters that said Longfellow, and it got squeezed out of the project, but we're trying to squeeze it back in with our contingency money, not additional funds, but using our contingency funds. So far, they're tight across the whole district. We're at about $1.6 million in contingencies left right now, but we think that's enough. We're being reassured by AECom that it is. And remember, this is a gross maximum price, so we can't exceed it. So I'm confident that we'll be okay, but we'll see if we can squeeze those letters in. At South High School, that project is going extremely well. The pool is dug. If you go there, you can look at the pool. You can see that there's a deck going across the top. That's where the audience or fans or parents or whatever you want to call it, the seating for spectators. Below the deck is where the swimmers would be, so they don't come in contact with one another, which is really good when you're trying to run an event and the parents can't get too close to their kids. That's good during an athletic event, quite frankly. So it's an 8-lane competition pool. You can see that the roof, all the roofing, help me here, the roofing, why am I blanking on it? Trusses, thank you. The roof trusses are all on the gym space going across all the courts, and they're beginning to lay all the roofing. And the goal there is that that entire facility will be roofed. Windows come in 2 weeks, so you'll start to see windows. The brick veneer is really going up quickly. And once they get going on the brick veneer, they go fast at all the projects. I mean, they fly, especially when it's the larger split face block. They really move quickly on that block. So that's in excellent shape. The change orders have mostly come on the South Campus due to soil issues, and I don't know what it is. I think the place must have been a dump at one point or something, because there had underground caves in it. I don't know, but it seems like we're always having soil issues compacting the soil. So we're almost out of the weeds on all of that. The steel's going up at the YMCA here shortly, so it's all framed. The senior center's all framed up. So it's really beginning to look like the pictures, and when you get those drone shots, you can really tell just how well it is. Most of the finishes are finished in the old, well, currently still South High School, soon to be Willoughby Middle, but that section, of course, will be, those 2 hallways will be our STEM hallways, and they're almost complete. We're just on punch list items for small things left. We did discover that, I don't know if you guys have seen it yet or not, but we have these cutouts and these pads that these kids can sit on, and they like to sit on them, but what we've discovered is they sit on them with their backpacks, and their backpacks hit drywall. That's bad. Backpacks and drywall don't go together, so we're retrofitting a cushion to go up the back to prevent the backpacks from tearing up the wall. And we're also discovering that they have those lockers, that they can punch the code into. Well, they like them. So they don't want to use their regular lockers, and they don't want to use those lockers, which is cool, though. I'm glad that they do. I'm glad they like them, and we'll have those in both high schools, of course, as well. Same technology. We had a few bugs, but they're all pretty much worked out at this point. Contingency money's a little bit higher at South, but remember, we can move that contingency money around. It's earmarked in each project, but it can be moved, and apparently we have a puppy that has entered the room. That will be a total distraction for me. I want to go pet it. So we're in great shape with our construction. Steve Johnson and Ken Adams have been fantastic. And then across the district, we got the 3M product in. We are making our plans to put the 2 bullpens in, and the bullpens that we're planning are at Thomas Jefferson and Edison Elementary. So those plans are being drawn now, and then they'll be built. Edison's a little trickier than anywhere else, and it'll be more expensive than anywhere else, but that's really the last piece that we have, and then the continuation of the 3M glass product, which will be ongoing for the next 3 years as we build that product up, which is a fantastic product. I hope you guys have a chance to see the video, just how difficult it is to break through that product. It's really nice. And then lastly, there is a company called Intellitronics, and we're partnering with Intellitronics. I don't know if you read it in the newspaper. They have the robot that can detect weapons. Allegedly, and I'll say allegedly, this is new technology, and it's not the robot really, it's the camera that's on the robot's shoulder. I'm not interested so much in the robot, although the robot is very cool. I'm very interested in the technology of the cameras that could detect and send an alert if somebody has a weapon in a book bag or anywhere. So we're looking at that, and then we are researching companies to do a safety audit over the next couple of months. So we'll contract with a company, or some local folks as well may be able to do it for us at a more effective cost. But we're going to have them just go around all of our buildings and produce an audit for us that tells us where our strengths are and where our weaknesses are across the district from a safety perspective. So we're working on that as well. So that is my construction update.
Thank you. It's now time for your resolutions.
Let's go, right?
Yep.
The first item for your consideration is a resolution and waiver agreements. These are primarily special education related, and that requires a vote.
Yes, it does. I am looking for a resolution, I'm looking for a motion to pass Resolution 5A, release and waiver agreements.
Madam President,
Mrs. Zern.
I make the motion to approve item 5A, release and waiver agreements.
Thank you, Mrs. Zern. Is there a second?
Madam President, I will second that.
Thank you, Dr. Beal. I heard you both, but it's been moved and seconded that we approve item 5A, release and waiver agreements. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Parkinson, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Zern?
Yes.
Dr. Beal?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Pachynski?
Yes.
And Mrs. Warner?
Yes, motion is carried. Mr. Thompson?
Thank you, Madam President. Item B for your consideration is a resolution to increase classified noon aid monitors, project help tutors, and student monitors pay increase to match the pay increase of 1.99% that the rest of the employees, union employees, receive. These are non-union positions.
Okay, you've heard the superintendent's recommendation. What is the board's pleasure?
Madam President,
Mrs. Pachynski.
I look to pass 5B, classified noon aid monitors, project help tutors, and student monitors pay rate increase.
Thank you, Mrs. Pachynski. Is there a second?
Madam President,
Yes, Mr. Jones.
I second that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. It's been moved and seconded that we approve item 5B, classified noon aid monitors, project help tutors, and student monitors pay rate increase. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Parkinson, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Pruszynski,
Yes.
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Dr. Beal,
Yes.
Mrs. Zern,
Yes.
and Mrs. Warner.
Yes, motion is carried. Mr. Thompson?
Thank you, Madam President. Item C for your consideration, school psychologist salary steps is what it's labeled. Essentially, we had, how many years ago, Mr. Murphy?
7 to 10.
Depending on who the individual is. For whatever reason, our school psychologists were placed on the wrong steps on the salary schedule, which cost them a step. At some point or another, I'm not sure exactly how, but the union became aware of this. We were unaware it was happening. We would have fixed it ourselves. They brought it to our attention, and we need to move these people to the proper step and then give them the increase that they had lost. So it's not additional funds, it's what they should have been paid to begin with.
Thank you. I'm looking for a motion to approve item 5C, school psychologist salary steps.
Madam President,
Mr. Jones.
I motion to approve item 5C, school psychologist
Thank you, Mr.
salary
Jones.
steps.
Is there a second?
I will second that.
Thank you, Mrs. Pruszynski. It's been moved and seconded that we approve school psychologist salary steps. Is there any discussion? No questions? Mr. Parkinson, will you call the roll?
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Mrs. Pruszynski,
Yes.
Mrs. Zern,
Yes.
Dr. Beal,
Yes.
Mrs. Warner.
Yes, motion is carried. Mr. Thompson?
Thank you, Madam President. Item D for your consideration is special services agreements. Again, these are special education related. Again, hats off to Eileen. It's a very difficult department that she runs. Budget well over $3 million. And she does a really fantastic job of trying to meet the needs of students to the best of our ability and maintain our cost. And it's balls in the air, and she does a great job with it. So that is item D for your consideration. I believe, Madam President, we are tabling item E. Is that correct?
That is correct. I don't know, do we need to remove it from the calendar? We can just table it? Yes. We noticed upon reading that there was some information that should have been in 2 of these policies, so we don't want to vote on it until that information is put back in.
So that'll be placed back in, Mr. Murphy, and then we'll put it on next month's agenda. And that would be a final read and approval next month, but we'll get them out to you so you can see the full read.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And Madam President, item F for your consideration is the personnel agenda. All those folks that appear on the personnel agenda have gone through all the appropriate screenings and will not become full-time employees until all those background checks are received by the Human Resources Department.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. We move to item 6, which is, oops, one behind here. Oh, maybe I'm a lot more behind. There. Meeting notification, the next meeting of this Board of Education is scheduled for Monday, October 8th, 2018, 7 p.m. right here at Northern Career Institute. And I'm looking now for a motion for 7A, adoption of the consent calendar.
Madam President,
Mrs. Zern.
I make the motion to approve item 7A, adoption of the consent calendar.
Thank you, Mrs. Zern. Is there a second?
Madam President, I second that motion.
Thank you, Dr. Beal. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the consent calendar. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Parkinson, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Zern,
Yes.
Dr. Beal,
Yes.
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Mrs. Pruszynski,
Yes.
Mrs. Warner.
Yes, motion has carried. Thank you. Before we adjourn, instead of having another meeting, we're going to have a board discussion, a little work session to finish up our work on evaluations and goals for the superintendent and treasurer. We are going to move to a warmer room. I don't know if you're cold, but it's cold up here. And again, it's a board meeting that you are welcome to attend, but again, there is no discussion or banter. The board will be work, and you're welcome to sit and listen and hear this exciting work that we get to do. And we're pleased to be able to get to do it. So thanks for coming tonight. We're going to move to the room over there where there's a table we can sit around, and You're welcome to sit around the outside of that table with us if you would like to.
Do you need this is your part?
Nope. We're good. Thanks for coming.
So thank you.